So the hour of 7:30 has arrived. I'd like to call to order this business meeting of June 18th, 2019 for District 116. Roll call, please.
Member Carter.
Here.
Member Exum.
Here.
Member Patton.
Here.
Member Pulaski.
Here.
Member Fisher is here. Vice President Hall.
Here.
And President Deming.
Here. Quorum is present. Additions, corrections, or modifications to this evening's agenda. We may have a very, very short closed session for purposes of collective bargaining immediately before voting on the contract extension. So between 12.8 and 12.09, 12.9. But we're awaiting the arrival of a few key people to have that happen. So I believe that's the only addition or correction to this evening's agenda.
Okay.
Seeing no others. Citizen statements. Do we have any citizens that wish to address the board this evening? And if so, please fill out a goldenrod sheet and submit it to our recording secretary. Seeing no one stepping forward. Last chance, last call. I'd like to thank the crew from UPTV tonight for putting us on television so the folks at home can watch. Last call for citizen input. Seeing none, we will go ahead and, as we indicated, we will have an exec session with action to follow between 12.08 and 12.9, and we most likely will have an exec session after tonight's meeting for the purposes of appointment. That first one is for purposes of collective bargaining. After the meeting, with no action to follow, would be an appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district. Motion to approve the agenda would be in order.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. No commendations or recognitions this evening, nor public hearing, nor communication. First, well, Corey, you're up. Is a report and a discussion about our secondary campus land use plan, which has been underway for the last several months, and it's ready to be presented to the full board tonight. So we'll need some light adjustment. Laurie? Somebody? That's good, thank you.
Want to turn your mic on?
Please bear with me while this loads. President Dimmitt, Assistant Superintendent Taylor, Board of Education, thanks for having me out this evening to discuss where we are currently. As you are well aware, we've been through this for several months now. This is the first time we are actually showing this in front of you today. So up here, that's the current state of the high school and middle school campus. And on the right is a generic schedule of where we started, approval back to some meetings with the community, meeting with committees, meeting with several people throughout the city itself, students, staff, parents, you name it, we met with pretty much everybody. And after all those discussions, that comes to where we are today, presenting the initial consolidated scheme for the campus land use plan. This is not finished up by all means. There's still some refinements, some developments that need to go. We need your input, and this is just the next step. So this is just showing several options that we have presented in the past to building committee levels. And several of these options were discarded, several were appreciated, and we have carried those through. As you'll see when I go to the next couple slides, a lot of different renditions, different parking arrangements, different ways to access the site, different site amenities, different opportunities for building expansion or reworking some of the interior space or providing additional flexible spaces, bringing the competition baseball field back to the site, arranging a potential field house, doing several different options with how are we going to make this site work best for this community.
Just move.
Sorry.
Yeah, just move it. Yeah. You can like,
Okay, sorry about that. So that leads us to what we're calling the consolidation scheme. Now, we have developed it further from here, and after this, I'm going to take it one more step to this is where we are today. So I know it's a little dark, but as we go through the next couple slides and videos, you'll be able to explain, see a little more what we're trying to do here. So several of the objectives of this campus land use plan were safe site access, sequence, and parking, high school entrance focus, flexible interior expansion spaces, student gathering spaces, expanded outdoor learning opportunities, some extracurricular utilization not only within the buildings but on the exterior of the building and the campus itself, and more of a campus identity unification. So I'm going to play a short little video and pause it every now and then and talk about a couple of ideas that we have discussed. So right here on, as you can see further back in the back, that is the high school. This right up this way, that is Race Street. And Iowa Street is aligned with here. So first point of emphasis, alignment of the main entrance of Iowa Street for Iowa Street across Race Street. So the roadway on the right, that is a one-way in only. And as you see currently right here on the right side, that is a bus lane, dedicated bus lane only. On the left side, that is where cars for parent drop-off and staff can approach. As you'll see on the immediately left here, there is place for community gardens. There is one currently on the site in this general area. This cleans it up a little bit more and arranges it a little nicer. As we continue on, you'll see something looks like shipping containers on the left, which that is indeed correct. Those are shipping containers. Our studies and recent developments around the country, actually, the very inexpensive uses of these can provide additional storage, and also when these are arranged, they can provide additional outdoor learning spaces. So you might be able to see some benches on the inside that can be used as an outdoor education or an outdoor class space, which those are, that's one of the main goals of this campus land use is where can we have additional outdoor learning. Continuing through, as you can see, the bus is lined up right in front of the main entry, on main high school entry in the back, and we'll go to that in the next couple seconds. On the left, that is where the staff and visitors can pull into the main high school parking lot. This street is a one-way street to the south. I'm sorry, coming from the race to the north, and I'll revisit this as an overall site plan as I carry on forward. So what you'll see here is, obviously, this is door one. Now what is not obvious, but what you can see here now, is there's a new entry canopy that pretty much emphasizes the fact that this is the main entrance for the high school. The scheme with the Urbana High School lettering and the form, just the form of the canopy itself, does mimic similar to what the current middle school entrance canopy looks like. Obviously, the design and layout of this is separate, but yet deliberately for the design to have it as a welcoming feeling. As you'll see, there's two main crosswalks. That the first crosswalk is for the parent drop-off, student drop-off, and then the second one is to get across the bus lane. So the bus lane is 100% divided from any of the other traffic on the site. And as you'll see, probably on the right here, there's some covered bike parking. There is limited bike parking on this site now, and considering that the community is heavily bike trafficked, this is just one of the places that we've determined to place some additional bike parking. Covered, therefore it gets out of the elements, raised so that it can service more bikes as opposed to the typical standard racks that are on campus currently. Now we're not going to walk into the building. What we're going to do is head east. As you'll see along the sidewalk, there are several protective bollards that will stop any vehicle traffic from coming onto the site itself. And actually, as you'll see as we're walking through, you'll see different wayfinding package signs that tell you where you are on the campus and where you're going. So this is a view to a newly developed Tiger Lane. On the right is, right around this area, this is where both your health and your auto departments are entering. So we're not fully developing this site, so we are providing additional access. And to get through this, those are removable traffic barriers. So, but during the day and during other activities, those will be up. So vehicle traffic will not be allowed, only for the surface activities. As you'll see here, we're kind of developing a scheme where it's more of a athletics or activities pavilion, entry pavilion. Also can be used for group activities, for student gathering, for extracurriculars, and various activities like that. But once again, it's not blocking access to any of the surface equipment that is back in this area. Now what you'll see on the left here is, if you noticed on the overall aerial site picture, there is a traffic circle, for lack of a better term, a roundabout, which provides not only general traffic flow throughout the site, one way more or less, so there's not any confusion. But what you'll see is there's an element in the middle here. Let's see if I can go a little bit further. Yep, someone's walking by, pardon me. So on the left, right here, this is pretty much a campus identity piece. Could be backlit, could be LED, could be similar to what you have currently with the monument signs that are LED lit. This would be on all three different sides, so you can have announcements for the campus, not only for the middle school and the high school, but for activities. It could act as a scoreboard as well. It could be either full LED or it could be backlit projected. Pretty much the items are limitless for this item itself. Now on the right, that is the north gym of the high school, and what we're calling this little pathway is a street lab. As you'll see, it's paved and there's several places where students can sit. Leading around to the corner. So in the background, right back here, you can see where the middle school is. Again, this is now one-way traffic going towards the middle school to the east. You'll see additional outdoor learning spaces here, another covered bike rack entry, and we're going to lead to what has been called the darker back alley between the schools. So I'm going to pause it here for a quick couple seconds. So what you'll see here is now there is no longer an alley. This is what we are basically closing off the space in between the two schools and having it used as a flexible space. One of the reasons for, we've noticed that the middle school cafeteria is overcrowded, overloaded. And for both the middle school and the high school, there are really no additional spaces for cheerleaders, for flags, for anything to happen in inclement weather or anything like that. I do recall one of our sessions with the community, right when it ended, probably within 5 minutes, flags were thrown around and hitting people getting out of the commons. So this just provides an additional space, and we're going to walk through it to give you an idea of what it could look like. As you'll see, there's going to be lots of sets of doors that can be opened, so it can be fully transversed during activities or when it needs to be open, but it can be completely locked off as well. So pretty much any activity can be used within this space. Right now they're just showing just generic tables, but this can be used for group events, for when there is a track meet or a football game or a soccer game or something like that. These doors can be open. It can be used as like some boosters can be setting up things in here. Various groups can set up items in here. Concessions can be sold temporarily in here as well. The boundaries are limitless. And it can be hardened up. So maintenance is minimal, very minimal. Very airy space and can be used for lots of activities. Now we're walking out to the back where the aquatics parking is. Looking to the right to the existing football stadium. And then not all parts of a campus land use plan are super exciting, but they're needed. So what you'll see in this area right here is looking from the aquatics parking to the what I'll call the service courtyard of middle school. There's a lot of garbage containers. There's a lot of recycling. It doesn't look inviting when you have a wonderful, beautiful new aquatic center entry, a potentially enclosed pathway in between the two schools. And now what we're proposing is basically extending out the same masonry pattern and enclosing all the service amenities, for lack of a better term. So it's going to appear as a well-designed, well-thought-out view, as opposed to seeing a garbage area. Rewind it just a slight bit here. So what you'll see here, and I do apologize, it is a little dark. You have the main parking for the high school on the northwest. We do have a softball field, full-size softball field now, that is fully built out to potentially host sectional events, state events, if there are more fields, but it has that type of quality of amendments that can fit on the site. Now we have also a baseball field here that has the same level quality of amenities that anyone should desire to have. It is a full-size baseball field. So the center of the field does go out to 385 feet for baseball. For softball, it does go out to 200 feet. It does have built dugouts, built-in bleachers, restrooms, you name it, it can have it. Not saying we're going to have it, but the availability can be on the site. What you will notice, though, is the parking for the middle school is, if you want to have both a baseball field and a softball field on a site, parking will have to be determined, more or less. So we do have parking counts, and I'll provide those for the next slide, but I want to continue on with some of the amenities for this layout. what you'll see here is, this is the corner of Washington and Vine. You have very, very similar brickwork and fence work on the opposite side, exact opposite side of the field of the campus for the football field and the track stadium. This is kind of bringing the same idea to this side. A lot of visitors to the site, they don't exactly know where they are when they get to this intersection. This kind of is their welcoming point. And this area is the main spine for the high school parking. So all the parking does gather into a central area, which is safe, blocked from any of the parking. So students, parents, staff, you name it, are not walking through the actual parking lot itself. They are walking through a much more developed sidewalk. There are benches and can be used for gatherings as well. And as you'll see, it does lead up to the main entry of the high school, main proposed entry. So I do have a slide for questions, but I know I want to hit on a couple of things. So what we have here is the entry onto Iowa. The current Iowa Street is perfectly aligned. The exit for the bus lane for the middle school is aligned with Fairlawn. The entry to the north is aligned with Broadway, and there is a second entry here that is in only that leads to the main parking lot that is aligned with Race Street to the north. So those are one of the items that was heavily suggested that is incorporated within this plan, and that's one of the things that we wanted to suggest. So with that, I'll open the floor to any questions.
I had a couple questions for
Sure.
you. I was just curious, I know parking, we were trying to figure out, could you tell us if you added any spaces at the high school? Because that was a real issue.
Yes. So currently at the high school, there are, actually I'm not going to, currently at high school, there are 128 staff parking, there's 14 reserved visitors parking, and there's 30 student parking. Comes out to about 170-ish or so.
Okay.
With this new plan, just on this north area alone, we have only 14 less staff parking. There is an additional 14 reserved visitors parking, and as you'll see, it might not be clear, but in the second access lane, there is additional what we'll call restricted time parking, since that lane is more or less dedicated to parent-student drop-off, and those only between the hours of, drop-offs and pickups.
Mhm.
But during the other times in the middle of the day, those can be used for itinerant staff parking as well. And the what I said, the 78 student parking spaces, now there's the small sidewalk that is kind of bisecting the high school parking lot. There's really no rhyme or reason for that location. That can be moved up, moved south, but this is to provide a demarcation of, okay, staff parks to the south, students to the north. So overall, for the high school alone, we are providing an additional 40 to 50 spaces.
Okay.
So there's an additional 40 to 50 spaces which we could choose to allocate between, like you stated, there'll be 14 fewer staff parking. We could take some of the 40 to 50 additional spaces and keep the staff parking at the same level.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And how about at the middle school?
At the middle school, there is, as you notice currently right now, there is 83 spots in that north lot.
Mhm.
With this layout, and like I mentioned, if you want to have a full-size baseball and a full-size softball field on site, that parking has to be determined.
Okay.
So it does not exist on this site.
Okay, thank you.
No
The
problem.
middle school staff uses the Michigan Avenue lot, and it's not fully utilized during the day. Being there in the morning. It's fully utilized from the aquatic center row to the east, but that row to the west is not fully utilized during the day.
Right, and I believe the middle school staff also can park in the middle. Am I right?
They can-
At the middle school, you know, they have that middle area to
The
park.
middle
in.
row for the
Todd's
aquatic
shaking his
center,
head,
they can
yes.
park on either side, but not during the
Right.
aquatic.
I'm talking about on the front. Todd shaking his head,
Oh.
yes. He understands what I'm. Yeah, yes, yes. Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Any other questions?
How much space is added in the middle in that enclosed area? What's the square footage for that, or do you know?
I would have to say right around probably about 3,000 square feet. It's a significant area.
Okay, good. It looked really good. I like that.
Thank you very much. And this is something that we have developed in the past for a couple of our other clients, and it is used. So for, yes.
Could implementation of this be done in phases?
Yes, that is one of the next steps would be discussing is priorities, one, and how should this be phased? Obviously, there are a lot of developments here that would affect something else. But yes, there's a lot of these items here that are very easily phased.
So, Corey, I know we asked you to look to see if there was any way to have those fields instead of facing each other back to back. And I'm assuming you tried and it was not functional to do that.
You're 100% present.
I know you all thought it might be a big challenge, and apparently it's
Yeah.
a bigger challenge than.
So one of our previous schemes, we did kind of try and lay out. It was not presented, but putting those fields back to back would eliminate either access onto Vine or access onto Broadway.
Okay. Other questions?
I just want to make a comment. I really like this latest version of it I hadn't seen yet with regards to the space just north of the enclosed bridge between the two buildings. That was really developed quite nicely.
Great, thank you.
Also, is there any way that we could get a link to the video or something we can post it on our website so that we can share it to the
Before this
public?
hand, I provided Lori 2 jump drives that has the video and the presentation on it.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
I just remembered what I was going to ask. For Tiger Lane, where you had those kind of cool canopy thingies.
Yes, ma'am.
That's where the student health center is too, right? Am I correct in thinking that?
That is correct.
Is there going to be parking available for those patrons too? Because I know right now they've got like, what, 3 parking spots, and then there's that little center space that's used for driver's ed and stuff. So
Right.
what will happen to all those areas?
So those areas are relocated to the opposite side of the street. They have dedicated spaces just for those activities. But more or less, the idea is getting all parking or all vehicle traffic away from the buildings.
Right.
For safety purposes, but
Sure,
yes.
sure. Okay, thank you.
And those numbers are accounted for in parking, so we're not.
I figured they would be. I just want to make sure that I was seeing it correctly when I was looking at the map. That's what I thought I was looking at, but.
Yes, you're correct.
Thanks.
Okay, so next steps, Corey.
Next steps is, well, where I'm sure there'll be some further comments later on. We'll recognize those. We'll be working with that and working with the administration and board as well. We will be developing some phasing schemes, and I guess the ultimate bottom line question is, what's this going to cost? So, and that's the next steps. Are there any further comments?
Looks very exciting.
Great.
Thank you.
No, this is definitely an exciting project to be working on. And thank you for having me out tonight.
I think the critical thing is we're trying to solve a lot of the traffic problems during student pickup and drop-off. The bus conflicts, the student parking conflicts, and the parent conflicts. But what wasn't stated is that MTD will still use Race Street and Vine Street as they currently do.
That is correct. We are not modifying any of the public transportation systems here.
Okay. But it does give more yellow buses in the site without, and facilitating the movement of the parents, and thereby increasing substantially the amount of safety. There's far fewer conflicts between people walking and cars driving.
That is correct, and there is clear pedestrian pathways for this site that is independent of the bus route and the parent route.
And you've mentioned it, but I do want to drive home the point that in some ways there's many aspects of this that enhance the safety of the folks in the buildings in a way that doesn't, in a way that still makes it a pleasant place to be.
That is correct.
Okay. Other questions? Ready to move on? All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Corey.
Our next report discussion is a proposed contract with Civic US with Derek Peterson of Civic US to facilitate a student learning retreat with the aim and intention of giving us some direction on moving forward with student representation at the board. Are there questions from the board about that? You have a memo in front of you. What's entailed is a one-day series of meetings that Mr. Peterson would do with administration, with high school staff, with board members. These are separate meetings with each of these groups, and also meetings with interested students to kind of point us in the right direction and to help facilitate moving towards having student representation, consistent student representation at board meetings. It's a one-day, expected to be a one-day proposal. If there is sufficient value after having Mr. Peterson here for one day, that we would that we feel that there would be benefit to having him come back for more than one day, that is to be decided later, after the first one-day session. So this is on our action items later, and I know it's different seeing it for the first time and then voting on it. But the concept is if we're intending, if we don't, in order to get this started at the right time next August, September, the decision needs to be made now. We can't wait until August to make the decision because then calendars can't get worked out. So Paul and I have been working on this as a subcommittee, and this is part of what got deferred, the first meeting in June. So it's in front of us later tonight. So if there's questions,
Yes.
Paul and I will try to answer.
Okay. I just have a question. I think this would be great. I'm very happy with so many of the student voices that have came out recently and spoken to us about the climate, the environment at the high school. I think it's important that they have a voice. I would like to learn more from this gentleman really about how they would go about choosing, and I'm sure all of this, and exactly what their role or duties might be sitting in with us, you know. So I think this would be very beneficial to have him, just my own comments, you know.
Yeah, Derek is an independent consultant, but he was worked out of the state of Alaska for several years, but during that time he was on staff with the National Association of School Boards and worked all over the United States for student representation, student leadership opportunities. So that's the background of the individual that we're looking at here. He consistently presents at National School Board Association meetings on this particular topic. So that's the background. I liken this process to, if people are watching us from home might remember that when CU 1-to-1 was started, the first step was bringing in a consultant from Connecticut, Norwalk, Connecticut, I believe, and held a meeting at Parkland to talk about how this was done in other parts of the country and what was good and what wasn't good and so forth and so on. And that was a one-day concept where, similar to this, where the staff then spent time afterwards, and then if there was a need, I believe the person from Norwalk, Connecticut was brought back one more time at the time that CU 1-to-1 was ready to be launched. But that may not be the case here. We may not need Mr. Peterson to come back if the
Okay,
one
thank
day
you.
works.
I'd like for us to consider a middle school voice. I think we were approached at one point, even if it's not a every meeting thing, perhaps an older 8th grade student that could periodically maybe have a set schedule to be able to come and also have a voice, especially since we've heard from some of them over the past couple of years as well. And we had a young man that came and spoke that was very interested in kind of being a representative for that student voice. So I'd like for us as a board to consider that as well.
I think we can add that to the list so that he meets with middle school students as well as high school students. I'm aware that there is a group of high school students working with some members of faculty, and they've approached me about wanting to be on the agenda tonight, and I said it's a little premature but that group will definitely be a part of this as well, because they're juniors. The students involved are sophomores and juniors, mostly juniors, and they're very motivated to have something done before they all graduate in 2020. So that's another reason to get this started in September, so that late August, early September, so that we have an opportunity to implement during next school year. So we'll add the middle school voice to that. Okay. Other questions? This is on a later agenda. If you think of later questions, we'll try to field them. It's an action item later tonight. Next, we have a consent agenda. On the consent agenda this evening are minutes of our May 21st, May 30th, and June 4th meetings. Our May bills and checks, education fund bills in the amount of $546,000, operations and maintenance fund bills in the amount of $40,000, transportation fund bills in the amount of $454,000, working cash bonds expenses in the amount of $127,000, indoor aquatic center in the amount of $10,000, tort in the amount of $94,000, life safety levy in the amount of $34,000, payroll $4.5 million, and adult education fund bills in the amount of $185,000. We do have a request for interfund loans that at the end of this fiscal year, which is the end of this month, that as many loans be repaid back to working cash fund as we do every year, and also a permanent transfer of interest in the working cash fund to the education fund. Personnel items, various personnel items. We'll have some special ones a little bit later. Approval of the June bills for payment because we do not meet in July. Aramark contract extension for the remainder of the summer until the new vendor begins. That allows us to do our summer food programming. A resolution declaring intent to retain interest earnings as interest and not to accumulate as principal in some accounts. Our Youth Assessment Center Memorandum of Understanding, which we discussed at a last meeting. Our UPTV Broadcasting Services Agreement, which we also discussed at the last meeting. The naming of the Sandy Cooper Memorial Path, which we discussed last time. The Nancy Thies Marshall mural at Yankee Ridge, which we also discussed last time for action tonight. Approval of Board of Education travel expenses, which is the required leadership training for our new board member that the state government mandates. And a resolution authorizing and directing the sale or disposal of personal property which is some library books and AV equipment. Is there a motion for the consent, any request to move any of that off of the consent agenda?
I only have one quick question, because I posed it last time.
Sure.
And that's about Nancy's mural. I'd asked about You Are Amazing.
Oh.
Did anybody follow up on that? That
I
it was
don't
my
know.
understanding
Yes,
that
you're
it was
right.
going to be part of it, and I just wondered if there was a follow-up on
I'm
that.
looking to see if anyone's in the room tonight that might have the answer to that, and let's make a note of that.
Yeah, I believe Brian Anderson may have a little more information on that, and I thought maybe he was going to be here tonight, but I'll have him follow up with you on that, yeah.
All right, with that, there's no request to move anything off a consent agenda. If not, a motion to approve the consent agenda would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor say, oops,
Oops.
roll call,
Yep.
sorry.
Member Carter?
Yes.
Member Exum?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Hall?
Yes.
And President Demmett.
Yes, motion's carried. We now have individual action items. The first of these is gifts. Steve Welch donated $20 to the General Education Fund, and the following donated a total of $150 to the Sandy Cooper Scholarship Fund. Dax and Nirali and Rhea Merriman. Motion to approve to receive the gifts and send a thank you note.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Next is Integra contract, which we also discussed via telephone conference last meeting. I see that members are here tonight. If there's any questions, but, right?
And I had left at your place a recommendation, a memo, that kind of discusses the different levels that they
Oh.
they talked about and the prices for those levels.
Yeah, okay, that was exactly my question.
Carol, go ahead and talk about it, please.
I don't think
Oh,
that-
Lori's got them there. She's
Yeah.
bringing them.
Thank you.
So basically, what
Thank
they
you.
recommended, if you recall, there was a basic service, a prime service, and a platinum level. The first year, I would recommend that we go with that prime, which is the middle one, only because it has some additional services that would help with the implementation. It involves some trainings and material templates that would help us get some things in place.
And it's an additional $750.
Yeah, the prime is $3,250 versus the basic is $2,500.
Any questions of Carol?
No, so I just want to be clear, because I understood that we were committing to 3 years, but it doesn't have to be 3 years at the same level.
No,
sounds
it doesn't
like.
have to be 3 years at the same level, but you do have to commit for 3 years to get this $250 discount that they're giving on
Gotcha.
each year.
Okay, great.
For purpose of TV audience, this is our fraud prevention, part of fraud prevention, and also an ability for staff members who wish to, kind of like whistleblowing and that kind of stuff can be done in an anonymous fashion.
And I appreciate, I'd asked Carol a little bit earlier, and I'm pretty sure she shared it with the rest of the board, because I just wanted to confirm that this was a fraud and ethics hotline. That, I mean, most of the examples given had to do with financial fraud, but that it was an opportunity for people who wanted to report ethical violations, and she
Yep,
confirmed that
that is
absolutely
true.
it is. And I also wanted to confirm that it is possible for a member or members of the board to receive the reports, that people outside of the, were not employees could, and she said that was in fact the case. So I feel very good about supporting this. Thank you.
Yeah, even with the basic, it can be, reports can be routed to 2 to 3 individuals. So
Mhm.
with prime, which I'd recommend we go with, you can have 2 to 5 individuals.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a quick question, Carol. Is there any appreciable difference to why we would choose Prime over Platinum? I mean, I'm looking at the bulleted points, and it's like the Platinum is just you can report to more people.
I think it's vendors. See how it basically, you can include vendors in it as well. Whereas
Oh,
the other ones
it's
are,
or
you have
vendors.
customers or vendors, and this one's customers and vendors. the
Yeah.
Platinum.
And then down at the bottom where it says consultation and samples, or basic templates was the prime, and it says customized templates. I don't even know what the difference would be, but your recommendation is to go with the prime.
Just for 1 year, just to
Yeah,
help us get
no,
started.
I think that makes sense too, and that's.
And we already do have a fraud awareness
Mhm.
training that we have all staff go through, but it'd be nice to see what they have, and theirs might be better, and would offer some additional information for our staff, so.
Well, and I like the way with the presentation last meeting we had where it was explained that Prime is good for first-time customers to
Mhm.
explain the process, and then if
Yeah.
you feel like you want to drop back, that's a good option, so I'm comfortable with that.
And if we approve this tonight, it would be implemented, or we would roll out the training at the start of the school year, or after
Yeah.
July 1, or?
I would think so. I haven't got that far with them, but I would
Okay.
imagine that would be the next step, is
It
they're
would
going to
be
probably work out a timeline with me.
Pretty
to
soon here, though.
Try to get this going for the school year.
Great. Well, thank you for researching that for us.
Ruth Ann?
We didn't have this information last time, and I'm finding it hard to want to vote for something that I don't understand the different levels more about than what the type of presentation we had at the last meeting.
You don't, they're on the page, the second page.
I got that. We had a lot of questions. Peggy had a lot of questions that, took us down a couple of different avenues about how things play out. And that's fine, I guess, but now we've got 3 different levels to choose from, and there's no one here to explain it.
There, I mean,
I
this
guess
was
is where I
highlighted
would go.
in the conference call we had in our
Yeah,
last meeting.
Yeah,
I mean,
heard.
This
Did
was
we-
all talked about the last
Yes.
time we met.
Including
Yeah,
the
we
3
did.
levels, including
Yeah,
the 3
we did.
levels.
It's so much.
I'm sorry they're not here tonight, but that's why we had them at the last meeting, is so the questions could be asked then, and subsequently, I mean, Peggy asked a couple subsequently too, so.
Mhm. Yeah, I was here. And this was the only company that we looked at, correct? Because they do our other stuff.
They do our audit, yeah.
Right, the audit, yeah. And we hadn't looked any further into any other company that provides something like this.
No, they were the ones that we provided information for, and that's what the board told me to go bring these people in, so that's what I did.
Can I go ahead and make a motion to approve the Integra contract as recommended by Carol Baker, our Chief Financial Officer?
I'll second that.
So at the prime level for an amount of $3,250 is what you're,
Annually, and then the basic at $2,500
For subsequent
year
years.
for year 2, for year 2 and 3, right?
Don't get me wrong that I am not for something like this.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah. I'm not comfortable with some of the things that were presented and,
I think it
yours
was,
were pretty pointed, and I was, they would have been something I would have been asking also, and I just wasn't satisfied with some of the answers. That's where I'm at, but we need this, and I get it.
yeah, I think it was a difficult doing a presentation over a conference call like it was, which made it hard to,
Yes, there was a lot of background noise.
a lot of
That was
background
hard
noise,
to
and it was
understand.
hard to follow. I agree with you on that, Ruth Ann. All right, board prepared to vote. We have a motion on the floor. It's spending money, so roll call is required.
Member Carter?
Yes.
Member Exum?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Member Fisher votes no. Vice President Hall?
Yes.
President Nemeth?
Yes. Motion's carried. Next is our, let me catch up to where I'm supposed to be. Adoption of our tentative budget for 2019-2020. Carol?
Yes, if I could call this a tentative budget, that's what I'm calling it, because it is a lot of unknowns in this. So I wish we didn't have to go through the process, but we do, so we're going to go ahead and approve a tentative budget this evening. So if you could, I provided the budget assumptions in your packet as well. I'll kind of go through and explain why this is so tentative, what are some of the things that are outstanding that we're kind of working through yet. And a large part of that, I think, has to do with not only the tax situation we're in, the fact that we're just approving a UEA tentative agreement tonight, as well as just the transition with administration and a lot of decisions that still have to be worked out as far as how we're doing some of the grants and things. So I wanted to start out first and just say that the taxes this year are going to include a CPI of 1.9%. But as you know, the tax bills are going out late, or went out late. They've already gone out now, about a month late. So that is severely impacting our budget for the current year, as well as it will impact it next year. We normally receive about $20 million in tax distributions before June 30th. We are not anticipating that we're going to get any. When I did the budget, I didn't anticipate any. As of yesterday, we had received a payment of about $600,000, which still isn't quite comparing to what we had last year at the same time. And then we're hopeful that we'll still get one more before June 30th, but not guaranteed, which is why later on in the board agenda, you'll see we're actually doing tax anticipation warrants, which we haven't done since 1993. And I'm hoping we don't have to do them again. It's just a safety net, and I'll talk more about that. But bottom line is those things are having a major impact on this budget. If I was to project some amount of taxes that we're going to receive, because really half of our taxes are normally received before June 30th, and the other half comes in next year. Well, that's $20 million is half of my ed fund budget. I mean, it's a lot of money. So I kind of want to make sure we know exactly what we're getting before I start adjusting the revenues, because it would, if I anticipated zero would come in, it's going to really sway these numbers. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to show you when I do the final budget that some of those, a big majority of those revenues we're going to have in next year's budget were actually taxes that we should have got earlier. So they're money that it's going to make next year's budget look like we have a really large surplus, and the current budget that we're ending is going to have a lot of deficits because of this. So we'll just have to explain our way. In the end, it's going to be okay, right. But it's just that timing difference is going to really throw things out of whack and make looking at this page that you're used to looking at this, it's going to look really bad for current year, really good for next year. So I don't want you to get that false sense of, wow, we have a $10 million surplus, which is what it may end up looking like, because that's not really true. But because we're cash basis. Pardon? No. It was sent to you via email. Sorry. So anyway, the other thing with our tax revenues that is throwing things out of whack is because we are tax capped, once the county clerk determines that capped rate, we normally have a 7-day period where we're able to make adjustments in the funds, because the clerk will go and take that reduction and prorate it amongst all of our funds equally. And I don't do it that way. I usually want to adjust them so that the revenues in certain funds are matching the expenses, and then I put that extra revenue in to the ed fund as much as possible. Well, that didn't happen this year. My reallocations that I sent them were not done by the clerk's office. So there are about $500,000 that would normally be going to our ed fund that won't go to the ed fund. So that's going to throw things even more out of whack. IMRF and Social Security are getting too much money. So I did a sheet I can share with you. It's a lot of information, but just so you can kind of see where the differences are going to be. Some of those will be able to be corrected via transfers. We're legally allowed to transfer money from certain funds to other funds. But for instance, IMRF and Social Security, you're not able to do that. So there's about $207,000 of money that's going into our pension funds that we will not be able to move out. And that will directly impact the ed fund. O&M is the other fund that was shorted about $300,000, which is not the fund we would want to short either. As you know, I was trying to put more money into that. I had raised the rate about 5 cents up to 65 cents. And so that's going to be shorted about $308,000. But as you can see, the tort fund was actually overstated as well, and some of that money can be transferred into O&M to help make up for that difference. But again, a lot of things, it's going to throw some things into funds that I didn't want to. And again, it's going to make the budget look odd for this one year. So, but I'll have more on that later. We're still working with the clerk's office. I'm not optimistic they're going to be able to correct it. So that's what we've been told up to this point. So anyway, that's not good news, but
Paul,
we'll deal with it.
microphone.
I mean,
It's not just, this is going to have compounding effects in future years, right? No?
No, it shouldn't. In total, we are getting the same amount of money, so it's not affecting our overall money we're getting. It's just affecting the individual rates. And our levies are always based on aggregate levy from the previous year, so it shouldn't impact anything going
Well, I understand
forward.
it's not going to affect the total amount, but when this is done again a year from now, right? These funds are already going to be,
I
it's
can
going
make
to have a compounding effect in future years, so I'm trying to say.
I'm going to have to make adjustments to balance it out in future years.
What a mess.
yeah.
And levy less in like pension funds because I've levied too much this year. So, but we'll get there. But it's just going to be, again, it's a timing thing. So we're going to have things that more money going into funds this year than we wanted. So we'll have less money going in the future to make up for that.
And Carol, do you feel confident that this is a one-time, one-off kind of thing, that this error won't
I will make sure
reoccur
it
next
doesn't
year?
happen again.
Okay. I mean, it's been acknowledged what
Oh, yeah.
went wrong.
I'm going to get a letter. I'm going to get a letter stating that the mistake was made. And
Okay,
yeah.
good. Thank you.
We'll work through that.
Okay.
But we'll make, they're sorry it happened, but we'll make sure it doesn't happen again. So anyway, that's the revenue side of things.
Okay.
Evidence-based funding, obviously, we know that there has been money budgeted by the state into the evidence-based funding model, so we should get tier money, but we just don't know how much yet, so that's also not included here, but that should be positive news in the future when we get that. Also, jumping down to number 5, our food service bid, as we know, came in less, so we're hopefully going to be saving about $153,000 there, so that's been budgeted for next year. I also did not include any salary increases just because the board hadn't approved the agreement yet tonight, so right now there are no salary increases included in the budget for anyone. Most of these other assumptions are the same. That's why I'm not going through them all. The district's portion of the Indoor Aquatic Center loss this year, about $216,000 is what we're estimating, so that's right around what it normally is. And then lastly, I moved there's a lot of information that I feel is good to keep that I always have in my assumptions about when things started, like when we started to have to pay for the crossing guards and that is kind of historical information I'm keeping. I'm just moving it all down to the bottom, just so it's there, but it's the stuff you're going to see every year, so I'm just moving it down to the bottom so you can have it for an historical perspective. So you can please approve it, but plan that there will be lots of changes come August, September, when we come back with the final budget, and I hope it will look better, but I'm gonna have to do some finagling or describing on this page to back out those early taxes and things that normally would have came in, so that you don't look at that surplus and think it's not realistic.
So when our auditor does the audit, they move to a modified accrual. So is there any way that some of this tax money that should have come in this current fiscal year we're in?
It will be picked up,
It
yeah.
will be accrued?
It shouldn't affect the audit.
Back
It's only
out.
the cash basis that's gonna be a
Okay.
problem.
All right. That's at
Yeah.
least good, so that our audit will be clearer than our cash position.
Yeah, it's just gonna be a tough year to try to explain things.
Is it still the case that the state funding is dependent on our balance sheet as of, on like June 30th or July 1st? So, I mean, that's going to be a benefit probably.
Yeah, you can probably, I mean, the June 30 is gonna be bad. I mean, the June 30 is gonna look bad, so, and that's what they're gonna use to, they put us in those categories: recognition, financial recognition. I'm not sure how many people really look at those very closely, but it's a one-time snapshot at June 30th, so we can explain why. So you're always given that opportunity to explain why if you end up going down a category. So we will definitely do that, to try to explain
And can I ask, under 15, you budgeted 25,000 for potential penalties from the TRS cap legislation. Does that reflect the fact that it's going up to 6%? Okay, so that.
I've budgeted 25,000 since the cap's been in place,
Oh.
and I don't think we've ever gone over it. I mean,
Okay.
we do a really good job of catching those.
Great, okay.
Trying to, not, because it's in our contract, we don't allow.
Mhm.
So it's saved us a lot of money.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, and hopefully by time of final budget, some of the changes that we're making right now that are causing some one-time expenditures and so forth will be a little bit clearer as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's always easier to budget too, once we have all the salaries in place, and I can budget from actually looking at a report instead of trying to determine. There's a lot of moving parts right now, so it's making it difficult.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Any other questions of Carol for the budget? We need to have a motion to adopt the tentative budget, understanding all the vagaries, tentative, I believe was the wording you
Mhm.
used.
Yeah.
But we do need a motion to that effect this
Yeah.
evening.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call, please.
Member Carter?
Yes.
Member Exum?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Hall?
Yes.
President Damon?
Yes. Motion's carried. Next is adoption of adult ed tentative budget for 2019-2020. Any comments, or we just move right forward?
I would like to bring your attention to a couple of things. You'll notice that the line that the district pays us, supports our program, looks the same, but Carol and I have been talking about wanting to restructure how that's done. So in the past, adult ed has developed a formula. I don't know a lot of the history of it, Carol, so jump in. Based on students that are from 16 to 24, I believe, or 21, 16 to 21. And then we've billed the district based on that number, and that number fluctuates. And as Carol and I talked throughout the year, it just didn't seem very clear. And
Yeah, the formula is been questionable for quite some time, but there's just this formula that's been used for years that we haven't changed. And I think with new sets of eyes on it now, Sean and I are kind of saying, yeah, it's probably time that we don't do it the way we've always done it before, and do something that maybe makes more sense.
So how we would like to structure it, it's the same amount. The district will not be paying more than they've paid on average over time, but we would like, most programs, I looked into programs like ours that are attached to a school district, and most school districts don't support the programs in the way we've been doing it historically, but instead they fund the administrative salaries and benefits, which would be Marcelos and I, which would also give the district a more consistent idea of what that will look like each year, instead of Carol not really having any idea what she's going to be billed for until the end of the school year. So Carol would know in advance, we would know in advance, it would be much more transparent and clear on what part of our programming the district is supporting and why. The trends in terms of numbers of students in that 16 to 21 age range have gone up pretty significantly over the years, meaning that whereas our program historically supported many older, non-traditional adults, we are trending younger. We still have those students in our program, but we're trending younger. So I would anticipate if we continued to bill with the formula that was used, it would continue to rise instead of staying somewhat stable. Or predictable, I should say.
And will this also be reflective of the alternatives that we're looking at for middle school and high school students?
So if we develop so if the students come to adult ed, this will reflect that. If we are looking at a broader program where we're taking in more students, then we would need to talk through what that could look like.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The other thing I wanted to bring your attention to, just so that you're aware, there's a new grant on here, the ICCB Innovation Grant. So some of you may know that Carl had a partnership with us for about 4 years to support our CNA program. They recently pulled out of that partnership. They're ending it as of this year is the last payment. They gave us about $45,000 a year and provided space. Unfortunately, they pulled out of that partnership and informed us of that a few months ago. And so I researched and decided to apply for a new grant through ICCB, and we were awarded that grant. As of right now, it's just a year grant, but it looks like there's opportunities potentially to continue it. So we were able to not only maintain our CNA program, which has been in our program for a very long time and I think is a huge asset to our community, but we're also expanding it because we're getting more funding from this grant. I'm also in the process of working with OSF. I've met with their representatives a couple of times to partner with them so that we have a clinical site and possibly look at some, how they could support us in different ways. So we're at the beginning of that, and I will keep you informed and make sure you have all of that information as I go down that path with them.
Thank you. That's what I was going to ask you was if anybody had talked to OSF to see whether or not they would like to partner with us.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's great.
We're working on it.
Yeah, and the ICCB, is that something you can apply for every year, or is that a multi-year?
So right now, so ICCB, of course, is our main funding source, but they offer different additional funding opportunities, and this is one that they've offered, I guess, for the last couple of years or a few years. This is the first year we've applied for it. There's no guarantee if they'll offer it again next year, but certainly if they do, we'll continue to apply. If they don't, we'll have to look at how we can continue to support, or in what form we can continue to support our CNA program, which is why I'm trying to work on other partnerships in the meantime so that we're not just counting on one funding source for that program.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of Shauna? Motion to approve the Urbana adult ed budget is in order. Tentative budget.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Member Carter?
Yes.
Member Exum?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Hall?
Yes.
President Bennett?
Yes, motion's carried. Susan? Next up is Press Plus 99 and 100, which, please don't go through all 75 pages.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
You want-
guys, I know, a
You
huge
want-
attachment with all the press policy proposals.
You want to turn your mic on?
Oh,
There,
sorry.
thank you. No, it's okay. There you
All
go.
right. I'm so loud, I forget sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm only going to go through two of them with you because the vast majority are either revisions to how they wrote a citation or maybe a small tweak to language that doesn't change the meaning. And we made no changes to those. It basically was just fixing up and updating. And some of these were just 5-year policy reviews where the only change is going to be your adoption date, because they do review them regularly to make sure there hasn't been a change that wasn't caught in the process. So there's only two I really want to talk to you about. The first is 4190, related to targeted school violence prevention programs. This is not a required policy to be adopted by the board. There's no statutory requirement, no regulatory requirement. It is entirely up to the board if they choose to adopt it. And it does exactly what the title indicates, is the idea is to set up, basic procedures to try and prevent targeted school violence. What I generally suggest with regard to this policy is if you adopt it, make sure you actually do what it says. While there is immunity that's provided through the Tort Immunity Act and also through case law, if you're going to adopt the policy, the best way to ensure protection for yourself is to actually do what it says. Because it's not a required policy, if you wanted to tweak what those things were, you could. for a bigger district like Urbana, a lot of these things are feasible. Smaller districts aren't in the same boat. So that's really the only recommendation I make with regard to this. There's no issue with what's in it. Just make sure you do it. The other policy, which I did not provide a copy to you, I just want to talk to you about briefly, is Board Policy 7270, and that's administration of medications to students. There were two major changes that were put into that policy, both of which are optional for the board to adopt. Neither are required. The first is related to the administration of asthma inhalers, that the board has the authority, if they can get an undesignated prescription, to hold those, to have them available for students during school hours and when they believe that students may need that benefit. So that could also include during extracurricular activities, athletic events, and things like that. The other part of that is Ashley's Law, which is related to medical cannabis. This one is much tougher to deal with on a legal level, as we all know, while the state of Illinois is shifting its position on cannabis and has already taken a different position than the federal government with respect to distribution of medical cannabis. It is still illegal to possess cannabis for any reason federally. So you have a conflict with the two laws. What the Ashley's Law provision in that policy does is authorize a board to allow students that have a medical marijuana prescription, which those are very restricted under the state laws as they exist now, to be able to have those distributed in school. However, they can't be distributed by employees. It would have to be a parent that comes in to do it, and that would be the registered person with the state. If you chose to adopt it, we suggest that you also make sure you have protocols together so that if a parent is in that boat or a guardian, that they know what they can do when they're in the building if they have a cannabis-infused medication in their possession. For instance, if they come in, they distribute the medication and they leave. They don't stop by the other classrooms or go to do a teacher conference or something like that. And that would be a protocol you would have to establish. The other thing to keep in mind is that because cannabis is still prohibited federally, doing this could have an impact on federal funding. Many districts across the state have already adopted this policy. I have not heard of a single district that has had an issue. I assume the second that happens, it will spread like wildfire around the state and we'll all know about it. But I want it to be clear that it is a risk. And I can't even begin to predict what the federal administration's position on this will be. I have no idea. I can't even begin to guess. So I want you to be aware that that is a risk. You can choose not to adopt the auto inhalers, the asthma inhalers. You can choose not to adopt the Ashley's Law provisions. You can choose to adopt both, or you can choose to adopt neither.
Board members. Susan actually has presented us with two optional policies that represent real choices. Sometimes press is kind of almost automatic. It's updating things with state law. This sounds like it's going beyond that. And this is the first time we've heard about these.
With the inhaler change, would we potentially face increased liability costs with our insurance carriers?
Possibly. Where the risk seems to exist with that one for possible liability is for those outside of during the school day activities. What would a parent or guardian expect their student to have access to? Would they expect maybe during track practice after school or cross-country practice that there would be somebody available to provide that inhaler? The way this policy is written, I would say yes, that would be a reasonable reliance. And so you need to make sure then that there is somebody available to distribute that if necessary. Now, all of it is contingent on even being able to get an undesignated inhaler prescription. When they did this with the EpiPens, I know that was a challenge for a lot of districts in the beginning. I don't know if it'll go more smoothly now or not.
That was kind of what I was thinking. Would it be up to us to purchase the inhalers? Or would it be the families, providing them under their own doctor's prescription? How
No.
would that part work?
Families already have the authority to bring in an inhaler if their student needs it under
Right.
your policies. These would be undesignated, meaning they don't belong to any student. They're in the possession and they're basically written to the district.
Okay.
Then they would be available if you had a student that did need an asthma inhaler. Now, in theory, that also comes along with knowledge of the person that is supervising the students of when that inhaler would be necessary. Students that already have asthma know they need to have the inhaler, and their parents know they need to have the inhaler.
Right. I was just kind of thinking, I know we have nurses and everything, but are athletic trainers, I wondered, aware of these signs and things, like would an athletic trainer be able to administer that, or would we have to designate a specific,
I would suggest if you adopt it, that you have training on, what the symptoms and triggers are that they would need to look to.
Okay. Thank you.
I was pretty sure we had training already on, isn't that true? I thought I read that we had training on asthma preparation because staff deal with kids with asthma. I thought that was already a given that our district
You might.
staff.
You
Right.
might already do it, and I know that when the EpiPen thing came through, that
Uh-huh.
was a new
Yeah.
training.
I'm not sure that would include coaches and especially non-district staff coach, regular staff member coaches.
Yeah.
I mean, in all reality, your coaches who tend to
Yeah.
see kids exert themselves probably have more hands-on knowledge of it than most people.
Right.
But
Mhm.
training is still a good idea.
Right. The medical cannabis, several other states have passed medical cannabis before we appear to be doing so. And do you know if the conflict between the federal law and the state law has led to lawsuits?
My just general interest following of it.
Mhm.
With regard to medical cannabis, compassionate care,
Mhm.
I haven't seen lawsuits or a lot of federal action on that.
Yeah.
Now, the general legalization for recreational use, that's still a pretty hot topic, and I think it's coming down the pipeline. And a concern being, I don't know how far it will spread. I don't know that they'll just limit to recreational, or if they'll say, no, it's illegal federally, no matter what, we don't have this exception, or if they'll even carve out an exception of their own for that reason. It's just impossible to predict.
And we don't know if those other states have had their federal funding at risk?
No.
Okay, they haven't, okay.
In the Ashley's Law, did it mention any specific age of students at all? Or not?
No. I can tell you that to get a prescription for cannabis under the Compassionate Care Act is not easy. It's very challenging. There are a lot of requirements you have to go through. So there's no age requirement under Ashley's Law because most of those restrictions exist on even being able to get it to begin with.
Okay, just my own feelings. I'm worried about some of the kickbacks that it could have on our district, the Ashley's Law, as far as the federal, as far as even with the inhaler, I still have, because what if someone is showing signs that we think is asthma, but it could be something else, I have issues kind of with both of these, just my own opinion, because of the impact that it would have on our district due to a lot of insurance and the federally funding, but that's just my own opinion.
Well, we're hearing from our lawyer on
Yes, clarification.
multiple
and-
facets to this issue. I would prefer to have an administrative recommendation from our administration and allow our administration an opportunity to to look at this and really think about how it impacts day-to-day. Our 2 weeks from now, 12 days from now, we'll have a superintendent. She's here tonight, but I see her shaking her head a little bit. I'm thinking that the administration needs to look at this a little bit before we, as 7 board members who aren't here on a day-to-day basis, really understand what Susan is telling us tonight and have a chance to confer with our staff and see what our staff thinks about this. We're trying to go to an era here where we have more staff input, and this sounds like a time when we probably need that more than
No, I completely concur.
more than normal press
I agree.
releases.
I agree.
I can certainly see scenarios, think of scenarios where having that policy on the books would be useful. Something like a child is a cancer patient, or we have somebody who forgot their inhaler on an away game and has an attack. I can certainly understand that there might be viable scenarios where having that policy in effect would be very beneficial to students, but I wouldn't want to enact them without guidance from our staff members.
And just to be clear, with regard to the Ashley's Law, even if the board approved the policy, there's not a circumstance where a staff member, because they are a staff member, should be issuing prescribed cannabis. That should not happen, because that's not even authorized under the Cannabis Control or the Compassionate Care Act.
Well, and we also know that policies like this require procedures. I'd like to see them both done at the same time. Nothing like having a policy and then not having the procedure ready to go and then having problems crop up, unintended consequences, and/or a parent relying on us and us not being able to fulfill our responsibilities. So that's my thoughts. I don't know what other.
I certainly support that. And in the past, we've always had administrative recommendations for any of these significant Press Plus changes that really impacted practice. So I support that entirely. And we have the time to do so. It's not a it's not an urgent matter. I mean, we can wait till after July 1.
Right, you can pull these 1 or 2, and then the others you can approve.
Gotcha. Well, I would support that.
How about a motion to the effect to take care of Press Plus 999 and 100 minus these 2?
Minus board policies 4190 and 7270.
Thank you so much.
So moved.
Second that.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. All right, good. 2019-2020 board meeting schedule. You have the schedule in front of you this evening. The only exception that comes to my mind is in times past, we have to move the August meetings to the 2nd and 4th because of the timing of start of school year, as opposed to 1st and 3rd. Jennifer, head shake as to whether that matters to you. Eventually here tonight would be in order. But other board members, just take a look at that. I just know that early August meeting, sometimes we deferred that because it's been particularly relevant as far as personnel hiring and so forth and so on is concerned to have those meetings a little later in the month.
In the past, we've also run into that, we like to take a vacation sometime also. So
some of us-
Yeah,
there
July.
have been a couple of times when we're not going to have enough board members for a meeting,
That's
so
true.
we've pushed it back.
The current schedule works for me. I was thinking I had to move a kid into college in August, but I think that's going to be between those 2 days. So
Yeah.
I, for one, will not be here on August 6th.
I can be here on either the 6th or 13th, but I will not be here on the 20th, so, because I've got a daughter starting grad school.
Jennifer, do you Is there a, so the 6th and the 20th works for getting school opened?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's hope we have a quorum.
So how many are here on the 6th? Just so we make sure we have got a quorum.
I plan on
Okay,
it.
so, yeah, okay.
Way to go. All right. So a motion to approve the recommended list of meetings.
So moved.
Second.
Sorry.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Administrative personnel recommendations. Come on up, Jennifer. Thank you.
Okay, I'm very excited. I'm going to change the order of how you have these listed on your paper, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So I'm excited tonight to be able to bring recommendations to the board for administrative appointments for Assistant Superintendent for Student Learning and Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. Just to give you a little background on the process, both positions were posted and the screening process was vetted by our consultants from School Exec Connect. School Exec Connect screened and interviewed 11 potential assistant superintendent candidates. 7 candidates were recommended for further action, and their information was shared with the interim superintendent, Dr. Williams, and myself. The candidates were interviewed by level 1 interview teams conducted by district admin, UEA leadership, licensed staff, teachers, support staff, parents, and community reps. 2 candidates were brought back for level 2 interviews with the executive team. After reviewing feedback from the interview teams and extensive reference checks were done, administration is recommending the following. We'll have Kim stand. Kimberly Norton be named Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning effective July 1, 2019. I'm going to give you a little information about Kim before you guys vote. If approved, Kimberly Norton will be joining USD 116 with over 22 years experience as an educator. Norton began her career teaching at Glen Raymond in Watseka, Illinois in 1995. Since then, Norton has worked as an educator at 5 different schools, conducted audits for the Kentucky Department of Education, and served as an elementary principal, middle school assistant principal, and most recently, Danville High School principal since 2015. Norton holds a Bachelor of Science in Education from Illinois State University and a Master's of Arts in Instructional Leadership from Eastern Kentucky University. She's also received her Specialist in Education and the 2017 Distinguished Graduate Award from Eastern Illinois University. So I'll turn it over to you guys. and let you vote. So you have to vote first.
Sorry.
So I would like to recommend that we approve Kimberly Norton as Assistant Superintendent for Student Learning.
And do you want these in separate motions? Or
Separate motions,
Separate
yes.
motions, all right.
Okay, I support that recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Member Carter?
Yes.
Member Exum?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Hall?
Yes.
And President Demmett.
Yes, motion's
Yay.
carried.
Now we-
Congratulations.
So I prepared them that they would be able to say just a couple of words. They're
And-
already in their orange and black.
I was going to say, I noticed
I
that
did not follow suit, but they're.
they already have orange and black on, so
Yeah.
we're
Good move.
good stuff.
Good evening, Board, Urbana family. I am extremely grateful to be a part of such an amazing district. I'd like to thank my husband, Andy, that's joining me this evening. Also, my 3 boys, Chase, Ethan, and Samuel, and my parents for their continued support. I'd like to thank Dr. Ivory Tatum and the selection team and central office for the faith that they have in me. And already they've made me feel so welcome from the very beginning. I'm looking forward to being a part of such a collaborative team as we work together to build a positive culture and really maximize student learning. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And Kimberly actually prefers Kim. So we've been saying Kim. So next, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. Angelica, Angie Franklin, is no stranger to USD 116 and the Champaign-Urbana community. She began her career with the district in 2000. Angie, did you stand? Please stand. I forgot to say that. She began her career with the district in 2000 as a choir teacher at Urbana Middle School, moving forward to teach choir at Urbana High School and Champaign Central. Franklin was promoted to Dean of Students at Urbana High School in 2010. Franklin served as Jefferson Middle School principal for 5 years. Before, she served as Director of Teaching, Learning, and Student Engagement in Champaign Unit 4 schools. Franklin holds 1 bachelor's degree, 2 master's degree in education from the University of Illinois, has her superintendent's endorsement, and is currently finishing her doctoral requirements at the University of Illinois. I'd like to recommend that the board approve Angelica, Angie Franklin, as Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources.
Excellent. And I move acceptance of that.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Member Carter?
Yes.
Member Exum?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Hall?
Yes.
And President Demmett.
Welcome home.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's a
you
yes.
so much.
Last
I'm
one.
so excited to be home, and I was going to say that. So thanks, Mr. Demmett, for giving me a warm welcome. And so 20 years ago, ironically, I was at a recruiting fair at the University of Illinois, and I met Dr. Preston Williams and Carmelita Thomas, and never would I have thought 20 years later that I would be privileged and honored to be a staff member in this space. And so I'm excited. My kids are excited. My husband's excited. They're at home. I have 2 young girls who are at Leal. And they share in the excitement. They're excited to be able to watch it on TV. And so I'm glad you approved me because I'm already working. So I'm trying to get the best for our students and continue our good work in terms of equity. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So just parting words. Thank you very much. We'll be sharing that information out to USD staff. Cameron's back there. He has some information ready to go. So we'll be sharing the good news with our staff tonight and as well as the media. So thank you very much. We're super excited to get going and have these 2 strong women join our team.
Thank you, Dr. Kingham. Yeah, cool.
All right, thank you. Next, we have 12.7B, which is some reassignments, administrative reassignments, and so a motion would be in order.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Member Carter?
Yes.
Member Exum?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Hall?
Yes.
President Demmett.
Yes, motion's carried. 12.8, resolution authorizing the issuance of tax anticipation warrants in anticipation of the collection of taxes levied for the year 2018. Carol mentioned this a little bit earlier tonight, that this is a regretful action due to the lateness of the tax bills being sent out.
And again, I think we're going to be fine, but this is just a safety net. It's precautionary since the board doesn't meet in July. If something would happen and we don't get the tax payment until late July, this would be necessary. But as you recall, we did approve at the last board meeting the resolution to transfer any bond proceeds. So the bond, the Yankee Ridge money that we have left over, the bond proceeds from our working cash projects, that money we're going to use first. So we have some strategies in place to try to do everything we can. This is the last resort, and I'm hoping we're not going to use it. But so there was a huge packet that you had in your board packet. We will hope we're not going to have all those things signed tonight. That's just, if we move forward, we'll get all those signatures later. But we're going to, just authorize this just as a safety net and precautionary,
So
and
this is
hope that
Plan
we don't
B.
have to do it. Plan B.
Right. Can we-
And I can I say too, that if we didn't have that $6.5 million in TIF 3 surplus, we would be doing this. That has saved us for the last 5 years. So without that, we would be getting TAWs every year probably. So let's hope we can keep it.
In the eventuality we need to do this, is there an estimate of what the interest costs would be?
Yes, in the packet, there was actually, we've already talked with Busey, because this would be a very short-term loan. I mean, it could just be for a couple weeks, up to maybe a month at the most. And it's no more than 4%. I think they estimated 3 point something was in the packet. But it would be small
Okay.
interest costs, because it's not going to be for a very long time, just a short-term loan.
Any other questions for Carol?
Do you want?
Motion.
Yeah.
There's batteries right there.
Oh, okay.
Well, now we've got all kinds of things.
failing.
Holy
Mic problems, folks. We're trying to get mics figured out. Go ahead. Anyone have any questions? If not, a motion to approve the staff recommendation would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Member Carter.
Yes.
Member Exum.
Yes.
Member Patton.
Yes.
Member Pulaski.
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Hall.
Yes.
President Demmett.
Yes. Motion carried. We have the correct people in the room. I apologize to our folks, but we need about a 5-minute session before we vote on the next item. Would the board prefer that we do all the actions and come back and just do that first? Okay, let's go ahead. So we really can't do 12.10 until 12.9 is done.
So maybe we should just go now.
12.11 is renewal of insurance. Can we Carol?
There was a memo in your packet. This probably shouldn't have been titled renewal. I'm just now catching that, because we went out and got another quote this year. We haven't done that in probably 15 years. Tom Brown's agency here in town has been asking to quote on our insurance for some time, and I finally said, okay, we'll give it a try this year. We're changing everything. Let's just change our insurance too. So we ended up saving about $65.
Oh, excellent.
So I wanted to point that out. We will be staying with self-insured workers' comp, staying with our excess with USI, who is our previous carrier agency, for a few of the policies. But property and liability, we're going to go with Arthur Gallagher here in town through EMC Insurance, and they are an A-rated company. So 1 year, so we'll see how this goes, and then I'll come back next year with either a renewal or we'll go get some quotes again. So I recommend approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Member Carter.
Yes.
Member Exum.
Yes.
Member Patton.
Yes.
Member Pulaski.
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Hall.
Yes.
President Demmett.
Yes, motion's carried. 12.12 is a proposed contract with Civic US. We discussed it earlier under administrative reports. If there's a motion would be in order, and any further discussion.
I move acceptance of the proposed contract with Civic US.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion, any further questions? Roll call.
Member Carter.
Yes.
Member Exum.
Yes.
Member Patton.
Yes.
Member Pulaski.
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Hall.
Yes.
President Demmett.
Yes. We'll now take our adjournment, and then we'll come back with the remaining action items. So we will try to be very, very quick, folks.
And we don't need a motion of any sort.
I'm sorry, thank you, Ruth Ann. We need a motion, excuse me, to adjourn to closed session for
So
the
moved.
purposes of discussing collective bargaining.
So moved.
Second. Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Member Carter.
Yes.
Member Exum.
Yes.
Member Patton.
Yes.
Member Pulaski.
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Hall.
Yes.
President Demmett.
Yes. All right, we'll go to room 30, and we'll be back as soon as we possibly can. All right, I'd like to call us back to order. We apologize, it took us a little longer than what we thought, but we're prepared to return to our agenda and take care of our two last remaining action items. 12.9 is approval of one-year agreement with the Urbana Education Association. This is a continuation of our 4-year contract for one more year, and with a few minor changes that were negotiated with the union. So a motion to approve that extension would be, as negotiated, would be in order.
So,
Go ahead.
so moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please. Everybody gets a chance to talk now.
Member Carter?
Yes.
Member Exum?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Hall?
Yes.
President Demmett?
Yes, motion is approved and carried. Next is 12.10, which is salary and benefits allocation for non-union support staff and district administrators. And this would be in the same average of 3% that is included in the total package for the UEA.
So moved?
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Member Carter?
Yes.
Member Exum?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Hall?
Yes.
President Demmett?
Yes. Motion is carried. That concludes our action items for this evening. We have no call for future or special executive meetings. We don't have a superintendent to give a superintendent's report tonight unless you're prepared.
Sure.
I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention, there's a lot of great things going on with kids this summer. Our summer extended school year programs, transition programs, summer school programs are underway at multiple buildings. Been out seeing some of those at work, and lots of good things going on with kids with opportunities to learn and transition this summer. A lot of our staff are working hard and doing great things with kids.
All right, and we do have one FOIA request from Kevin Collins, which involved some series of communications having to do with some of the work that was being done at Yankee Ridge. That's been fulfilled, correct? Our FOIA officer indicates it has been fulfilled. Board reports. I have one. I just want to indicate that our soon-to-be named superintendent, but soon-to-be on-the-job superintendent has actually already, in many ways, started work, and we want to extend our thanks for the time that's been involved in that, and I want to indicate that at a later date, when we have an exact amount of how much time and effort has been put into this, that we need to provide Jennifer Ivory Tatum with some consideration for that amount of time. There's an immense amount of work that's already been accomplished and working on after finishing a full day of work at Unit 4, comes over and finishes up her second day of work, in many cases with 116. So we appreciate that, especially since our interim folks ran out of a lot of time and are no longer with us for the summer, so for the remaining of June. So I just wanted to make that clear. And I think with that, then we can adjourn to executive session for purposes of specific personnel. I'm sorry, the lawyer says I got to read this. The appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. There will be no action following this session. Roll call.
Member Carter?
Yes.
Member Exum?
Yes.
Member Patton?
Yes.
Member Pulaski?
Yes.
Member Fisher votes yes. Vice President Hall?
Yes.
President Demmett?
Yes, motion's carried. We will adjourn for the evening.